Hello, everyone. Welcome to the 2019 Brain Health Online Summit. I am Amy Zelmer, founder of Faces of TBI, and myself, along with Dr. Jeremy Schmo from Midwest Functional Neurology Center, we saw a need in the brain injury community for more training and education on alternative healthcare methods and modalities for those suffering from the lingering effects of a brain injury. So each week during the month of March, you are going to hear from presenters who will share with you either their story of living with a brain injury or their experience working with the brain injury community. And today I am here with Franck Assaban. And Franck is one of the top vestibular PTs in France. He received 3 balance and vestibular rehabilitation certifications in 2009 and 10, an inter-university degree in functional balance rehabilitation, a degree in vestibular rehabilitation, and a university degree in sensory disabilities and balance disorder rehabilitation. He teaches vestibular rehabilitation at the Pierre-Marie Curie Paris University. Franck is a member of the French Vestibular Physiotherapy Society and the International Autoneurology Society. Alongside his clinical practice, he has been developing a range of improved solutions and tools, such as optokinetic stimulators and new solutions for motion sickness. In 2014, he developed virtual reality head-mounted displays for vestibular rehabilitation and assessment and founded Virtualis in 2015 to bring this new technology to patients and therapists. He is presently working with the top 3 research teams in various fields, including vestibular, balance, posture control, motion sickness, rehabilitation after stroke, and functional rehabilitation. He has co-authored 1 publication under review about vertically using virtual reality and is conducting 2 other studies on stroke rehabilitation and motion sickness. He is an invited speaker to present the use of virtual reality in major congresses and events in France, Italy, UK, Morocco, Tunisia, Luxembourg, and many other countries. So Franck, we are so happy to have you here. Thanks for being here today. I know you're currently traveling in the DC area, so we're on a closer time zone.
Yeah, that's better. Thank you for the invitation. I'm really glad to be here today.
Yeah, I am so excited. So Dr. Schmo has this virtual reality system in his clinic, and I've only gotten to use it once, but I've watched numerous people use it for different things, and it is so cool. And I'm so excited to have you here to share with us, you know, what it does, how it works, how it came to be. So let's maybe start with some background on how you came to develop this amazing tool.
Sure. Well, the story, it started with for motion sickness, basically. I was looking for solutions for my patients to recreate all this sensory mismatch between the vestibular and the visual system we experience for motion sickness when you can't see the road, for example, or when you're in the cabin of the boat. So I started with very homemade systems, and I was looking at the virtual reality goggles, the head-mounted displays, but it cost a lot at that time, and it was not easy to set, and the technical specifications were not good enough not to create motion sickness because of it. There was a lag when you moved your head and so on. So I started with homemade systems with 3D glasses to watch movies in the plane, for example, with YouTube videos of corridors moving and tunnels and that kind of things. And then Oculus started a Kickstarter campaign to crowdfunding for his first virtual reality goggles that was affordable, something like $400. So I jumped in this opportunity and received it after a few months. Started downloading demos, and when I put the headset on and tried even demos that were not made for a medical purpose, I understood immediately it was exactly what I was looking for. So I found a developer and started developing optokinetic stimulations inside the goggles, and then optical flow with tunnels moving for visually induced vertigo and all that kind of conditions, and then motion sickness with the waves, the C simulations. So we started really on vestibular rehabilitation and motion sickness, and then with the progress of the technology and the HTC Vive, this headset which allows you to move freely in the environment, and with trackers you can put on the head or on the shoulder, that kind of things. And we combine this with the lip motion technology for hands recognition, to have the fingers. So immediately we started working on the mirror therapy,
Yeah.
a new kind of mirror therapy where you can actually see your hands moving. So if I move my right hand, I can see both hands moving, but I can even hide my motor hand and see only my amputated or hemiplegia hands. So my not moving hands moving. When I'm moving the right hand, I can see only the left hand moving. So it opens a new era for neurorehabilitation. And then adding new software, especially for neurorehabilitation, because it's so easy to fool the brain and to change the perceptions and to create sensations with this head-mounted display. So we started developing for neurorehabilitation after concussion, for fast head movements, and post-stroke rehabilitation. So basically, that's how it started on the field with my patients, because I still had my clinical practice until 2 weeks ago.
Oh, wow.
So that was really good to be able to try to test on me and on patients every step of development. And then with research teams all over the world, in Australia, in the US, in Sweden, everywhere, we could have a very good feedback, because it's not made for gaming, it's really made for rehabilitation and to have good results. So we start having published clinical studies, especially with this new mirror therapy, that are really amazing.
Mm-hmm. I was able to watch a patient. He's a younger kid and had a stroke or an aneurysm. I can't remember which one. And so his left side is much more, he can move it, but he doesn't have control over it. And I was watching so it's designed so that the practitioner or whoever can see the television screen, you see what the patient's seeing through their goggles.
Exactly.
And so it had he was like tossing a ball in his hands in the virtual reality. And even though he wasn't getting his left hand, to his brain, he saw his left hand catching the ball. It was really, really cool.
Yeah, and it makes two things. It makes your brain believe your left hand, for example, is really actually moving.
Mm-hmm.
So you will add this not moving hand into your everyday life motor. You add it in your everyday life condition. It means we made studies for after 3 years of the stroke, 3, 4, 5 years, and we have patients who has started just after 2 months of rehabilitation, who have started eating with the fork with this hand. It was the first time in 5 years, just because as they really believe the hand is moving, they make the effort to try to open really the hand and use it again. So that's the first thing. And the second thing is that it's really motivating for the patient, because you're not asking him to do something if you ask him to do something he knows he can't do, it's not motivating. If he sees he can do it, even if it's virtual, then it's motivating. And especially for this young guy I saw it on Facebook. For him, it's some kind of a game. So of course it's motivating, and he will he'll do it again and again, and it's a new kind of rehabilitation he's actually playing. So for young people, of course, it's another level of motivations.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I know they did another one with him. There was like bugs flying around. He had to catch the bugs. So it is, I can see where with younger patients, it is a form of a game. So it's fun for them to do, and it's rehabilitation at the same time.
Exactly. Yeah, it's a bit different from what we can see usually on game for rehabilitation, because I think we designed the software for clinical results first, and then we add some kind of game design behind for the motivation. But the most important thing for us is to have a clinical results, because it's a medical device. So it's really designed to help patients to have results, and then we add some kind of game behind for motivation.
Yeah, I know Jeremy had me in there. I was walking through a mall, and I had to like not walk into people. And it was really cool because, I mean, when he first put it on me, and then it also has sound. I could hear the people.
Multi-sensory stimulations.
Yeah. And when he first put it on, I was like, oh, I don't like this. And then I pretty quickly got acclimated to it. And I walked through the mall, and, you have to look around and not walk into people. And, I'm further into my rehab, but I could see where earlier on this would have helped you with some of that like depth perception and the overstimulation. And because going to the mall is a pretty big chore right after a brain injury.
Sure. That's usually a bridge between the rehabilitation and the real life.
Yeah.
That's where virtual reality really is for some escalator stimulation, the mall, the supermarket, even we have a metro, it's a New York subway, metro crossing the street. So you can do rehabilitation to your patient for everyday life activities without having to bring him outside in a supermarket. And then we have all the settings. It means the volume of the sound, for example. It can seem to be a detail, but for some, having a lot of sound and a lot of people is too difficult. So we can start with a very low sound. We can set like 3 people in the whole supermarket, so we can play on all these settings session after session to help the patient be able to go in a real supermarket, because there will be many different steps. And then we can put only 3 products in the supermarket and ask him to catch 2 of these 3, or have a whole realistic supermarket with all the products. So there's a lot of different steps you can do with your patients.
That's really, really cool. Because, the supermarket, I remember right after my brain injury, like the supermarket was so overwhelming. You've got people, you've got lights, you've got sound, and then you have to look at a shelf full of like cereal, right? Well, which brand did I want? Like it's a lot of stimulation. And this is such a great way, like you said, to bridge that gap between real life and rehab.
And thing is, the results we obtain in virtual reality, even if it's not real, well, we can see from the first results we have on clinical studies that the results we have on virtual reality are exactly the same on real life. So it's not only a bridge, we know it will help people in real life. That's a very good thing.
Well, I know, when he had me in the shopping mall and, people are walking into you, and I mean, it's totally just right here that they're walking into you. But like, I remember being like, oh, sorry,
Sure.
like it's very, very real, very realistic.
And you see, for this kind of stimulation, we can set, for example, the distance between the avatars and yourself. They can leave you like a protection of 1 meter or 10 centimeters. So they
Jeremy
can
put me
come
in a
very
full.
close. Yeah, they can come very close or leave you more space. And that's something important when you try to rehabilitate someone to being in a very crowded situation, to be able to set this distance between you and the people, especially for falling people, for example. They don't like to have people coming very close to them because they're always afraid.
Yeah. Yeah. Phobias is a big one. Yeah.
Yeah.
So what are some of the other cool features? I've only seen a handful of things on here. What are some of the other cool things that clinicians can be doing with their patients with this Virtualis?
So there's, of course, there's all the vestibular rehabilitation. So it's not only vestibular, but it's all the balance conditions um, for elderly people, for risk of falls, for example. So it's all the optokinetic stimulations. After concussion, it can be important as well for coordination between head and eye movements. So all these optokinetic stimulations that are new kind of optokinetic stimulations, because it's 3D and it's real scenery you see moving.
Mm-hmm.
So it will help work on the posture, on the proprioception as well when it's vertical. So there's all these visual tunnels as well, with going down, up, all the diagonals and everything. So that's mostly for 3PD, the PPPD condition, some kind of visually induced vertigo as well, and proprioception. We have all these measures after stroke or vestibular condition, the subjective visual vertical, the way the people use their visual system for balance. That's the rod and frame test, measuring the subjective visual vertical with a rotated frame, and it's a rotated full field of view. We use that for the clinical test of sensory interaction on balance. So that's the visual surrounding that moves with you, to measure. It's CTSIB test for it's a posturography test, the sensory organization, to know if you're using more the visual system for your balance or your vestibular or proprioceptive system. After, we have the dynamic visual acuity. That's really interesting, because usually we measure, so that's something interesting after concussion as well, and vestibular condition, of course. So it measures your ability to read, to stabilize your vision when you move your head. So usually you do all the testing on a screen, so you see letters appearing and you try to read them when you're moving your head like this. And usually it's limited to the size of your TV screen, even the rehabilitation. So inside the headset, usually patients feel uncomfortable, not when they move their head like this, but when they turn around in the street, someone is calling them and then they look like this.
Yeah.
So you need a really wide range of movements.
Yeah.
So that's what's interesting with the rehabilitation inside the goggles, is that it can be 360 degrees. You really can move your head like this and do all your rehabilitations with really wide angles. Then we have all the motion sickness rehabilitation, with reading in a car, the sea simulation, being in a car on a mountain roads. We have as well the fear of heights with this one. It's this one is really cool to try, because it's it's an elevator that can go up to 400 meters. Then it opens, and you have to walk on a small boards going outside the elevator. So it really helps. I use that a lot for my patients, and it gives amazing results for fear of heights. Then all the crowd simulations. So that's the mall you see. There's a small corridor, a shop, the metro, and the streets. Escalator simulator as well, that works well for a risk of falling, because there's a huge reaction at the end of the simulation. Then we have all the neuro rehabilitation. So that's the mirror therapy. There's one for mirror with the pronation, supination. That's the ball you see on this kid. Um, there's memory tests, cognition, the Stroop test. Don't know if you're familiar with this one. It's a cognition test. You see there's written green, for example, but it's written in blue. So
Right.
that's a test and rehabilitation, cognitive rehabilitation. We have all this hemi-neglect measure and rehabilitation. That's the Bell's test and this kind of hemi-neglect after stroke.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Is that like when someone can't see one hemisphere?
yeah, in fact, he sees, but his brain doesn't. It's
Process.
like exactly you see you can see that on internet. You'll find a lot of images. It's quite disturbing because people can eat half the plate
Mm-hmm.
you and say, okay, half the what's on the right he will eat, what's on the left he will
Doesn't
ignore.
even know it's
You
there.
no, you turn around the plate and oh, I didn't finish, and then finish his plate. So
Yeah.
we have all this evaluation and rehabilitation. It's the bugs you see appearing. You can make them appear on one side, so it will attract the attention of the patient on the side that's neglected. Um, there's the whole cervical spine rehabilitation, so we can use the bugs, but there's also
Mm-hmm.
movements like this. You have all these following targets moving. And we have now all the upper limb rehabilitation with the controllers of the HTC Vive, but also we put trackers here for the shoulder
Oh.
rehabilitation, the hip, the knee, so even the legs. There's a test now, the reflexes, so it measures the time of reaction. There's balloons appearing, you have an arrow and you have to explode all the balloons. So you can start for neuro rehabilitation, very small, but you can do also a 360-degree and running, and so it can go from neuro condition to the sports time of response. For example, we have all the range of motion measures. I think we have about 100 different exercises now. I think Jeremy did not get the latest soft updates. We have 10 new exercises for especially shoulder and hip rehabilitation. Neuro, we have some kind of sequences of piano playing with your hands. The the accuracy of movements for your upper limb. Well, you see, there's a lot of things now for
Yeah.
neuro, functional rehabilitation, balance, and motion sickness.
Is there also a car simulator? Did I see that
Yeah,
right? Yeah.
exactly. So you have the steering wheel and pedals, and so you can use that after neuro condition, of course, after stroke, especially for hemi neglect. But it's also for the motorist disorientation syndrome, people that are not that can't drive fast on the highway, so they feel like they're moving. So it's really a driving rehabilitation.
Very cool. Yeah, it's such a cool, I was a little skeptical of him putting it on me, but it's not as I was worried it would make me feel really dizzy and nauseous, but once you get it on and like you like center yourself, it's really not
Yeah.
it's not too bad. And like I said, he put a whole lot of people in that mall with me.
Yeah, thing is, as I told you, I used that with every patient I had in my office. So young people, very old people, falling people, Parkinson disease, multiple sclerosis, every patient. So I needed to be sure, playing with the settings, you can use that with every kind of patient.
Yeah.
the thing is not to, it's very powerful. So you need to start, now we have protocols, you need to start on a level 0. Make sure for some stimulations like optokinetic, we even have a test session. So it's very short, it's 2 minutes. You use this, the first session with your patient, and you see how he reacts. If he feels all right, then you can start on the level 0. But you have to be very careful about how powerful you start with the patient. You always need to start very easy. So you put the goggles, then you ask the patient to turn around and look, and that's what you explained. You need to understand where you are, the way you move, and then you can start really the stimulation. So at the beginning, I was afraid, especially for old patients. So I used this only for young patients, and I used other tools for old patients. And then I started, and I realized it was very well accepted by old patients because they don't even understand the technology. You put the goggles,
Right.
they are inside the environment. They don't question it.
Yeah.
They don't realize. Usually young people will say, wow, that's amazing.
Yeah.
It's so realistic. But old people know. You put them and say, wow, that's nice. And they are immediately in this virtual reality, in this other reality.
Mm-hmm. And, it's such a cool, like, it's able to accommodate. I mean, someone could be in a wheelchair and use it, and
Sure.
it's able to accommodate so many disabilities, and it can do so much, like you said, it really can help someone who can't use that left arm. It gets them, replicating. They think that left arm is moving. Like, there's just so many things that it can do. I think it's really exciting technology.
Yeah, I use that in for demo in neuro centers in France with patients that had critical stroke a few weeks before. So they were really with cognitive conditions and of course motor heavy neglect. They were really like that. And you can always find at least 2 or 3 different exercises and start very easy level. And then you see their eyes opening because even if they're not actually doing it, they believe they can do it. So they start again believing in the rehabilitation, and it's really motivating. And you can use that for almost any kind of patients, and that's what's interesting, and that's how we designed the whole solution, is to be able to treat maybe 90% of your patients with the same tool, just a different exercise, a different software inside.
Mm-hmm. So what about, a lot of people listening are probably struggling with headaches and dizziness. Those are probably the top symptoms I hear people complain about. So how would they be able to use this to help recover from those?
For headaches, we don't have anything yet. Maybe we'll sort out something with different teams, because we develop with every team that uses the software. We have 300 users now in I think 18 different countries. So they ask us different things. We try with them, and we receive so many demands. We try to focus on one at the time and develop new software. So for headaches, we don't have anything yet. For dizziness, of course, is my specialty. So we have maybe 10 to more different exercises. It depends on what kind of dizziness. Usually, optokinetic is very effective.
Mm-hmm.
Because you'll have patients complaining when they move their head or when they are in crowded environments. Yep. So they're usually visual dependence. So they use their visual system too much, and when everything's moving around them, they feel uncomfortable. So the main system of optokinetic is that your visual system is seeing something moving. Actually, when you see trees turning, you really feel like you're moving on the opposites. direction. It's like when you're sitting in a train station, you're standing still and the train next to you is moving. You
Yes.
really feel like you're moving
Yes.
backwards. So we use this with optokinetic stimulations. So your visual system will say, I'm turning, if the trees are turning left, for example, your visual system will say, I'm turning right. Your vestibular system and your proprioceptive system on your feet will say, no, I'm not moving. So there's a mismatch between
Yep.
the visual and the vestibular and proprioceptive system. So your brain will understand the visual system can be wrong, and will decrease the importance it gives to your visual system, and will increase the importance of the vestibular and proprioceptive system. So the patient will decrease his visual dependence and will get used to having movements around. So that helps a lot. It's optokinetic and the visual flow, linear flow and moving flow. So then that's the first step usually. Then we have fast head movements with the bugs appearing, and with the planet, you follow the planet, because usually you'll have patient complaining about this kind of movements and they will fall back. So we have all this rehabilitation as well for a cervical spine condition as well. And then dynamic visual acuity for very fast head movements. And then I think after we will bring them in the escalator, the mall, all these more everyday life activities, rehabilitation. It gives really good results for risk of fall and dizziness in general.
Mm-hmm. And I would have to think too, it helps with anxiety, because I think a lot of anxiety stems from that feeling of moving, and you're anxious
Yeah.
to even go out into an environment. So being able to do it in this controlled, safe environment, I think has to be very anxiety reducing.
Sure, and we have a relaxing environment for the end of the session, for example, such as being laying down at the beach or in a forest with you'll see rabbits running, and it's very quiet, just focusing on the sound, relaxing environments as well. So after, maybe sometimes if you go too far in the rehabilitation, it's interesting to let the patient have a few minutes of recovery after, before you get the headset out.
I'm gonna have to tell Jeremy to put me at the beach.
Yeah, the beach is great. Yeah, really.
Well, Frank, is there anything we didn't touch on that you want to be sure our listeners knew about Virtualis?
Uh, I think we could use hours to talk about
I
every
know.
software, but I think we talked already about what's important, and yeah, you can have all the clinical studies on our website and everything. So no, I think we talked about almost everything was
Yeah.
important.
Yeah, it's really, really cool technology, and
Thank
it's
you.
been really fun to see other patients. I think it's more fun to watch the other patients use it than be on it myself. But like I said, I'm gonna have to try the beach. And I have to try the elevator too. Now that I don't know, it
Yeah,
sounds
the
scary,
elevator,
but it sounds
definitely.
cool. Well, thank you, Frank, for being here.
My
This has
pleasure.
been a great conversation and just really, really cool technology. I think this is really going to change a lot of the way that, whether it's a PT or a clinician, how we treat patients after brain injuries. So thank you for being here, and thank you everyone for watching, and we'll see you again in the next episode.